Hey, everyone, welcome back. And I thought what I would do today is just do some ramblings about a couple thoughts on my mind, and particularly around the way we process things and energetically. Now, I will talk about my near-death experience as well. But one of the things I want to share with you right off the bat, and I thought this was interesting, and I actually used this in my How to Read Cards for Yourself and Others book. But one of the things that I shared in here, and I want to make this our topic a little bit today, is if you are an artist, you are not loved for who you are. You are, but for what you awaken in others. So if you're an artist, you're not loved for who you are, but for what you awaken in others. And I want to say that that's, I think, a truth in all of our real communication, and the communication we're having here on YouTube and on this channel is really, what are we awakening in each other? What kind of people are we becoming? Who are we in the way we're being in the world? And I think one of the things that really has come forward to me is the massive humanity I'm seeing here. And listen, there's, and I'm not even talking about trolls, because they just go bye-bye, and that's not even an issue. And I think it's really, what is profound for me is I'm recognizing that, one of the things that makes something popular, or and I want to say in connecting us all, is that when something relates to a reality in your life or a sore point in your life. And so I think that one of the things I'm really recognizing now is, especially in doing this, is how invalidated everyone is. Not just you, me, how invalidated we go through life being these days. And the concept of, if someone has a thought, like, I think that this person may not have done such and so, and people are like, whoa, wait a minute. And I had a thought about some of the deep upset, where people are defending each other, particularly with this, the Watts case. What I'm noticing is that when people get really into upset, I think it's because we really don't want to face the sadness around and the deep depressed energy around this entire Chris Watts case. And I say Chris Watts case, but I think that the truth is we're really energetically looking for someone to blame, because this can't just be Chris Watts. It can't just be he did this on his own. It has to be somebody else's fault. And when I say that, I mean, we all know he did it, right? And I'm just going to take that as a truth, because I'm going from where, the law enforcement officers brought him in and he confessed. The thing that I find interesting about this is that there's more conspiracy theories about this case than I've seen in many, and I don't know how many others I've seen this in. I really kind of haven't in many. Somebody's going to go, well, wait a minute, there's this case. But I'm bringing this up for a reason. And that is that the conspiracy theories and, oh, I think she was at the house, or this one was there, while they may, on some level, there may be truth to something, here's the thing. The thing is, it really is masking the real feeling. Which, when I really sat down today and I thought about letting this go, like really, people sometimes viciously say, you need to let this go, you blankety blank, 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 bye. But they're making a point, which is that, yes, eventually I need to let it go, and I'll let it go when I'm ready, and you'll let it go when you're ready. But the thing I think is really telling here, and when I see people in such upset, it really comes down to not wanting to deal with the profound sadness around losing Shanann and Bella and Cece, and knowing that at this point, Nico would be 1 to 2 weeks old. And I think that for me, when I look at that, I don't know, and I can't answer this for you, why I just want to cry over it. Why, and I think sometimes it's easy to say that, and this goes to the video I did about Nicole Kessinger too, is that, I think it's so easy to attack her because it's like she must have had something to do with it, and maybe she didn't. I'm not arguing that right now. What I am saying is, if we remove her from the equation, and we remove Cindy, and we remove the murderer himself, and we remove the parents and everything around that, we're left with the profound sadness of this woman's life being taken. And that in itself is the real tragedy. That Shanann was very full of life. And I think that some of us feel, I do, that it's not kind of fair for her to be taken. And it really makes me think about how much of the time I personally spend in a depressed energy. And I say depressed energy because it's like, it's so quick to say, oh, you must be depressed. And it's like, I guess so, So I want to talk about that a little bit. I want to talk about where some of these stuck energies come from. And when I say stuck energy, one of the clients I had come to me, and it was really funny because like I'm nervous now about looking up because people start analyzing what I'm doing. And it's like, please don't, because I don't know what it means myself. But I had a client come to me, and this is what back when I was really starting out with readings. And I don't know why I'm pulled to tell you this story, but I feel that there is always a series of events that, in life, where sometimes we spend a lot of time trying to avoid the feelings of. And so what I want to say to you is that, and this is about Shanann, and then I'm going to move on to the other stuff, which I really want to talk about, disease in the body, stuff like that, because it relates to this. And it relates to that because Shanann had an autoimmune disorder, and so I want to talk about that. But I had a woman come to me, and she came in the door, and the first thing she said was, and at those days I was working with Jeff Lewis from the Flipping Out show. I was his psychic, and I worked with him, with houses and stuff like that. Anyway, she came in the door, and the first thing she said to me is, okay, and she puts money down. I'm like, okay, whatever. This is what I was reading at my kitchen table. And she put money down, and she said, okay, I just want to know if my house is going to sell, because I was doing the real estate thing with Jeff. So that's how I kind of got more into this work. So she puts down the money. She said, I just want to know if my house is going to sell. And I just sat there and no. She went, what? I said, no. But if you want to know about meeting the love of your life, then we can talk about it. And she was like, I am so over love. That is the last thing I want in my life. She said, honey, I'm 65, been married twice. I have grown kids. I have no interest in meeting anybody. And I said, okay, well, I said, I think there's some other things you need to know. And this is when I was doing a lot more seeing work, okay? And I'll explain the difference between that and readings and what that is, the difference is. Because I feel like there's a segue that has happened over the years where we're not readers anymore. We're kind of like intuitive guides, and I'm going to share what that is in a minute. But anyway, so she sits down, and she finally sits down because she was standing there. I said, listen, I think you really need to sit down because you're here for a different reason. And whenever you say that to somebody, they sit. So she sat down, and I said, okay, what I want to tell you is that in about 3 weeks, I feel that you're going to be diagnosed with terminal cancer. She's like, what? And I said, but they're wrong. She's like, what? I said, this is why you're here today. They are wrong about that diagnosis. They're completely wrong. You do not have terminal cancer. They're going to try to get you to move toward hospice and no how do you say, chemo or help or whatever. I forget what that term is. So, and she said, uh, what do you mean? I said, you need to go to the doctor, you need to get tested. And when they say to you, we're not going to recommend X treatment, which we would if it was earlier, but you're pretty far along, demand the treatment because they're wrong. It's different. I don't know what it is about this cancer. It's not what they think, but take the treatment because they're wrong. You are not going to die. In fact, your house is not going to sell and you're going to marry the love of your life. And she's like, what? And she was like in such upset with me. And you'll notice a lot of times in my languaging, I'll say in upset because I feel like our emotions are a choice. And I'm going to be doing a video on the second chakra and emotions. That's a different one. But anyway, so I said, you know, I get that you're in upset right now. And she said, in upset? She said, this is crazy. I said, okay, but let me just tell you the rest of this because you need to know these signs when they show up. I said, your house is not going to sell. And I said, remember this, rejection is God's protection. Just remember that with this house thing. But what I want to tell you is this man is going to come right to your door. He's going to come right to your door. And he's connected some ways. He's like, he's connected to something around the corner, like he was around the corner from you. And I don't know what that means. I have no idea, but I'm getting this impression that I need to tell you this information. And she was just like, you know, like, I'm sorry, but if someone told me that I had to, you know, that I was going to be diagnosed that way, a terminal cancer, I don't know that I'd hear anything else they had to say. So I said, please get tested. So she left. And that was basically the gist of the conversation. So she ended up, excuse me, I yawn a lot when I'm doing intuitive stuff. But anyway, so she then goes off. Nothing happened. I didn't think about this. Whatever, you know, not because I didn't care. It's more because at the time, when you do work like this, when you do intuitive work or you're working with people and supporting them in their choices, it's not like I'm holding on to what they're doing. They're not coming to me like an addiction. It's, you know, I don't allow that. You know, it goes back to the difference between supporting someone on their journey and giving them information that will help them versus telling them their future. And there is a difference, again, later. So let me finish the story. So I guess it was about 6 months later, maybe 7 months later, this woman made an appointment to see me. It had to be more than 6 months because I don't allow anybody to come to me more than once a year. Like twice maybe, but more than once a year. Otherwise it's an addiction and I don't believe in that. So, because it's really about validating you. So she calls up and I didn't remember who she was. And at the time, you know, I was taking appointments on a notepad, right? This was in I want to say the late 90s. So we were kind of like horse and buggy back then. Anyway, so this woman comes and I looked at her and I said, oh, you seem familiar to me. So, okay, let me look at you know, I shuffled the cards and she was kind of just waiting. And I said, oh, this is really strange. And she said, what? And in those days, like, I really was working a lot with tarot. Now I work with chakra wisdom. And I said, this is really strange. And she said, what do you mean? I said, well, it's kind of like you had this cancer, but it was like a baby cancer. So it didn't really develop. And it's odd. I don't know what that's about, but you're fine. And she was like, okay, stop. I was like, okay. And she said, I need to tell you, just turn that thing off. And it was, in those days, a tape recorder. And I turned it off. And she said, listen, I need to tell you what happened because first of all, you were right. She said, I left here. And she said, it was literally around 3 weeks later, I'd gone to the doctor. I said, listen, test me for this stuff. You know, she said, I felt fine. And she said, sure enough, they all called me back in. It was, the oncology folks I want to say it was UCLA. I don't remember. And she said, they sat me down and she said, you can imagine this. She says, they said, you know, you have a terminal case of cancer. It's at this degree, whatever that was. And she goes, no, you guys are wrong. My psychic told me you would say this, and she said that you've made a mistake. Because they're like going, we really can't treat it at this stage. She's like, no, you have to treat it because my psychic told me. And I'm like thinking to myself, oh my gosh, like, I want to dive under the rug, and I'm like, I can't imagine if I was there because I would have been horrified, but she was like, no, you're wrong. And they're like thinking, no, cuckoo, like she's crazy. So not only does she have this terminal thing, she also is going insane from it. So they were like, so anyway, so she goes home and she's kind of reeling from it though. I'm not gonna pull any punches on this. She was so stunned by this news that, and she said, part of me wanted to call you. And then I was like, I didn't know what to do. And I was standing in my living room and I was standing there and I said, I don't know what to do, God. And there's a knock on the door. And she said, my house wasn't selling, So I was like, what on earth is all this about? And I opened the door and there's a guy standing there. And she said, I'm thinking to myself, you know what else? What else could happen today, And she's looking at him and he says, hi, my name's so-and-so. And I'm wondering if your brother, and do you have a brother named so-and-so? She said, yeah, he actually lives a couple miles away. And he's looking at her and smiling. And she's like, do you want me to give him your information? And he said, no. He said, are you okay? And she said, I don't know. I don't know. And he said, I don't mean to be forward, but I grew up around the corner from you. And I feel like, we grew up together. And she went, wait, what'd you say? And he said, I grew up around the corner from you and your brother. And he said his name. And she goes, oh my gosh. Yeah. So at this point, she's getting truth bumps, right? So she says, come in. She invites him in and he never left. He lived in Vegas. She was in Los Angeles at the time. And as she told the story, she said she had to go through chemo and it was rough. And he basically moved into her guest room and he stayed there and took care of her. He was retired and he took care of her for 4 months as she went through this. Her neighbors, because she didn't sell the house, she said, I kept thinking that you said rejection is God's protection. And I kept feeling rejected because I couldn't sell this house. And she said, my neighbors kept bringing me soup and food and they would take care of us. And he was there for me. And she said, he went back to Vegas a little bit to bring more of his things over. But she said, we're getting married. And I was like, what? She said, you were right. He's the love of my life. And he was around the corner. And she said, I don't know what I would have done had I not had that information. And I said, I'll tell you what happens with this. I said, you came here to validate something in your own soul. So what I think about readings and what I think about doing readings, I find 90% of the time, especially now, it's not so much I'm predicting the future, but I'm validating what you already know about the path you're on. And, this goes back to, and I don't know if I told you the story, but I had a woman, yes, I will tell the near-death experience story. I had a woman call me. She was, it was on the radio, and I think I told the story. Okay, so she calls in and she's saying, does he love me? And, all this stuff, and she's crying. It was when I had a radio show, and she says, does he love me? And I went, who cares? You're miserable. And this is the point of a lot of this, is that, you see, she needed therapy, not a psychic. And I think psychics and intuitives have gotten really bad raps because the idea is that they know something you don't know. And the truth is that we're all intuitive, every single person. It's how you focus this beautiful white light energy. It's the energy from the heavens. So people who are born again, they are focusing all of their intuition on the Bible, on what that means to them, on their study, on their relationship with Jesus. People who are doctors, they go to school and they learn everything so they can forget everything and then remember it in the ER. Same with police officers. They go and they get trained. So when we look at the way that the law enforcement investigation went with the Chris Watts case, we can look at, they did what they knew to do. And they worked him into confessing every step along the way. And of course, the woman police officer, and forgive me for not knowing her name, and I think she was FBI. I know there'll be 20 people who post it, but anyway, so the point is that she was great, and she's the one who planted that idea. And she said, hey, you know, did Shanann hurt them? And that was when he could go, yeah. And you know, that's when he said to his dad later, she was right. She was right about Shanann, meaning, you know, I'm not going to protect her anymore, is what Chris said. And it meant, you know, my interpretation of that was, you know, he was trying to shift the blame onto her. So let's talk about this idea of blame a little bit. Let's talk about the idea of, you know, emotional. And I'm going to talk about that in a different video. I really want to talk about more about our second chakra, mature versus immature emotions and how they run our life. But for this, I want to give you the cliff note of my near-death experience because I promised it. So I was always a little intuitive growing up. And I had a mom who loved the liquor a little too much. She ended up being an astrologer. She was into astrology. And that's kind of where my interest was a little bit. I loved cards because what I love about cards is their stories. And they're not anything that's coming into you. It's not evil. It's more just a picture. And the picture is an intuitive moment that I look at, and it comes to life, and it brings something into my awareness. So that's my thing. I love cards. So this is a long, long time ago. I was in my 20s and I got really sick. And it was one of those like, I thought I had the flu, and I just started getting sicker and sicker and sicker throughout the day. And I called, my dad kept calling, goes, are you okay? And I go, Papa, I don't feel well. And finally I just said, you have to come get me. He said, okay. And he took me to the ER and the old St. Vincent's Hospital in New York, where both my parents died, which is really kind of strange synchronicity. But I remember sitting there at the edge of the table, and the ER doctor finally came in, and she said, how are you doing? I said, I don't know if I'm going to make it. And I just started falling back. And as I was falling back, I saw her kind of move toward me very quickly, but it was almost like slow motion, because I turned around and I saw myself falling. And at that moment, like as soon as I had that awareness, I heard a steel door slam shut because I heard noise. And then it was like, whoosh, and it was silent. And it was just complete darkness. And it was peaceful. It was a real sense of peace. And I remember I was kind of like in this space. I was lying on my back, and it felt like a tractor beam almost was pulling me slowly up. And as I looked up into where I was being pulled, I saw white light, and I saw what I thought were little fingers moving, you know, like over light, you know, like this, when you see shadows, you know. And I thought, oh, that's so cool. Wait a minute. It's not my time. And I started struggling, and I started saying, this is not my time. I got to go back. I got to go back. I have more to do. I got to go. And it was like I was struggling for so long. All of a sudden I heard this. I heard it's almost like a tractor beam, right? So you can imagine like a generator being turned off, and it went, whoosh, and all of a sudden it was like I was falling through space, and then I sat up on the table. And I looked at everybody, and they had paddled me. I mean, I was like, so the point is, that that was me coming back. And then over the following days, I was sitting in the hospital, and a lot of other things happened in that time. But suffice to say that I really, at that point, recognized that I was knowing things I shouldn't know. And I would have a nurse come over and take my pulse, and I'd say, you know, it's good that he's gone. I know it's painful, but he had another woman in Rhode Island the whole time. And I remember this one nurse going, what do you mean? What are you talking about? She bursts into tears, runs out of the room, and the head nurse comes in and it's like, you know, what are you doing? Are you gossiping with other people? I'm like, what are you talking about? I've been laying here asleep for 2 days, you know. But I started to recognize that there was something going on, and I had a bunch of interns came in. I'm going to make this part a little brief. A bunch of interns came in, and one intern, they were, you know, they make rounds to kind of learn. And this one intern, I just looked at him and I kept looking at him, and everybody's like, and I said, you know, I need to tell you this. I said, please get your tires checked. They are bald, and you have no business going skiing with bad tires, because it's going to be, you could get yourself killed. And everybody's like, did you know each other? And I'm like, I'm realizing that I was just pulled to tell him that. And he was like, no, it was very awkward. He left. I guess it was a day or two later. I don't know the timing of it. Came back into my room, and I was in the hospital like 5 or 6 days. And because I was dangerously dehydrated. And so they were replenishing my fluids. So just so, because somebody's going to go, what was wrong? That was what was wrong. And he came in and he just said, can I ask you something? I said, yeah. And he goes, how did you know that? Like, I went and got my tires checked, and they were really bad. One was so bad, it could have been a blowout. How? And I go, so here's the deal. If I tell you I'm hearing voices, you'll send me over to Bellevue. So let's just say, I don't know, good guess. And he went, fair enough. And you're right. And he said, thank you. And I said, oh, no, I'm glad you're okay. I said, have fun skiing, you know. And he was like, anyway, he left. So that was the thing that started happening. And it was after that I found out you could pray and you could ask God to, because this was a gift. You never give a gift back, but you can use it for a specific purpose. And I asked to use it for writing and helping others and communicating. So there's more to the story, as there often is. I'm going to talk about in the next video. I will be talking about orange and the meaning of that second chakra, because it becomes very important. I've still got 2 or 3 more weeks on the first chakra with the toolkit, which is this book. I'm doing a journey with this book for people who have that. But I think the orange video may interest all of you. That said, I hope you have a really blessed evening. It's been so wonderful to communicate with all of you. Please remember to be kind to each other. Please remember that the other person who's reading your post, it can be me, it can be somebody else, may have some severe things going on, and have some compassion for maybe their inability to communicate in a better way. So we're going to work with that, and I'll talk about immature and mature emotions and how emotions run our life, or we run them. Talk to you next time. Bye for now. Boop.